Hello and welcome to Colleague 7 Sprint Review for 19.08.03. This will cover the work undertaken between the 20th of August to the 2nd of September. Our sprint goal for this sprint has been to complete the first phase of the MailChimp integration by allowing for a candidate or contact search result to be uploaded to a list in MailChimp, with all subsequent correspondence then tracked. Looking at the high-level items and to explain further, in this sprint, we've been able to finalize and launch the first phase of our MailChimp integration. This will allow for an upload of candidates and contacts to a MailChimp list, or audience as it's now called, via a search result. All subsequent correspondence will then be recorded in Colleague as per the word delivered in the previous sprint. We have continued to work on the print invoices functionality, which is run from the list invoices area to generate an invoice document from within Colleague 7, and this will continue into the next sprint. Staying with the back office project, we've delivered the ability to generate a manual invoice. From a candidate record, we've given users the ability to create an experience record from the candidate personal tab, specifically alongside the recently added current employer field. I'll give a demo on this shortly. We've added duplication checking on the username and email fields within the users area in admin. We've added the resource by user field to the offer and placement selection screens. And we've added the job title as an option to the requirement selection screen. We'll now go through a brief demonstration on the key features from this sprint. So the first point to go through is the new MailChimp integration that's now implemented as standard as part of Colleague 7. I will be recording a more fuller, comprehensive video with regards to the MailChimp integration because there's quite a few components in relation to it, and for the nature of a sprint review video, this is supposed to be more of a brief review or demonstration of the functionality as opposed to going through every element in relation to it. So if I just quickly cover the main themes in relation to the integration, the first point to note is in relation to the user group permission. So there's now a user group permission for add to MailChimp audience, which is an option there for full access or no access. That obviously needs to be set to full access to give the users the ability to use this functionality. There's also a global setting and user setting in relation to the actual MailChimp API key that you have assigned from your account. So when I say that, what I mean is under the section of integrations, what you'll see is a MailChimp API base URL and a MailChimp API key. So the MailChimp API key is generated from your account. So within the MailChimp account, you will be essentially under the extras section, you've got an area for API keys against your account. And what you can do is basically create your API key and label that as necessary, and then you copy that API key into Colleague under the user section, and the base URL you get from using the known API server name or server number, which is associated against the API key. Again, I think I'll cover all of that in the video properly, which I record over the course of next week. But essentially, what the two key fields that will need to be populated: the MailChimp API base URL and the MailChimp API key. So that can be both a user setting in terms of a user's own individual API key, or it can be a global system API key as well. So you can have both. Essentially, is the key point I'm making there. From there, once you have those elements in place, there's a background service which is running, and that will run every 10 to 15 minutes. And once you've put that in place, after about 10 to 15 minutes, you'll see that functionality essentially replicated in terms of the link between the system and your MailChimp account. And then when you do a search, say in this scenario, if we do a quick search here as an example, and if I select, you can do this, obviously select a group of candidate records. Off the selected records submenu, you have an option here for add to MailChimp audience. So I've been referring to it as lists previously, but it's now referred to as audience, is their terminology for it. But essentially what you're doing is you're selecting add to MailChimp audience, and from there you'll have a drop down list of all of the audiences that are associated to both your account, if you've got an account associated against your user settings, and also the global account as well. If there's a MailChimp account that's been set up in global settings, it will list all of the audiences here as well. What you can also do as well, which is quite useful, is if you reference the word shared in the MailChimp against the list name, then it will know to share it to all users as well. So because we're using a background service, you can share MailChimp audiences as well. So even though you've got only your account referencing the API key, it can be shared to other users as well. From there, essentially, you would obviously select your required MailChimp audience. You give it a tag if you want to. The use of tags is now the common denominator in how you would separate or categorize contacts within lists in MailChimp. So we can put in there, we'll just call that client there as an example tag, hit OK, and then essentially what it does is it adds the selected records over to MailChimp. It will advise if the number that have been added. If there's some that are already on the list, it will tell you that some are on the list. And if there's any that have failed to go up because of either MailShop status advising that they don't want to be contacted, or GDPR status advising that they're not appropriate to be contacted due to GDPR, then obviously it will restrict those from there. In terms of within the records themselves, then if we go into one of these example candidate records, if I go to history, so this is the record that has not given GDPR consent, so the records must be deleted. So if I go back to, this is another example candidate record. If we go to history, what you'll see is that there's an option here. There's a history logged for added to MailChimp audience. So that's obviously a track of when that candidate or contact was uploaded to the MailChimp audience. What you're then going to have as you send campaigns from your MailChimp accounts are history logs being tracked in the system based on the reporting statistics. So there'll be a history log for MailChimp campaign sent, MailChimp email opened, MailChimp links clicked, MailChimp unsubscribed. There are also notifications that are triggered as well as part of an unsubscription to make you aware. So as I say, there's quite a lot of factors in relation to the MailChimp integration that I think need to be covered in their entire video. But just to give you an overview of the functionality, what you basically have is from a search result, the option now to add to MailChimp audience. And then from there, obviously, any future correspondence via the use of MailChimp with those candidates and contacts would then be tracked within Colleague. So that's the key functionality there. But as I say, I'll record a full feature-length video over the course of next week to cover the entire setup of that functionality and demonstration of it. The next point to cover is just the updates that have been made to the selection screens, specifically the requirements, offers and placement selection screens have each been updated with some additional fields. With the offer selection screen, that's the resource by option here. So if you are interested in or wanting to find offers that have been resourced by certain consultants, then as an example, we now have the means to be able to do that here. So if I just open that offer, just demonstrate that. The resource by is obviously myself as a person that we were doing that search against. If we go to the placement selection screen, again we've got resource by now that's added there as well. So you can obviously view on placed by, but if you want to view on resource by, then you can run that search. And again, it's going to find all placements where the user is as the resource by user against that placement record. Against the requirement selection screen, we've added the job title into the requirement selection screen. So if I just select account manager there as the key example, as a search, and what you can see there is the job title account manager assigned there. And if I perhaps switch this, say manager, and change this to be contains, do a search, and you see we've got other manager items being done there. So the wildcard options are also at play. with the job title as well. So that's the requirement selection screen, offer and placement selection screens being updated in this sprint. The next point to cover is the update that's been made to the back office area, and just a general update on where we are with the back office area. Again, based on user group permissions and rights, you'll have this back office option within the navigation as and when it's been enabled. You'll have the option to generate invoices, to view those invoices through list invoices, and what we've been working on the past couple of sprints is the manual invoice element and also the printing invoices. So what you can now do is manually create an invoice, so it doesn't have to be an invoice generated from a placement record. It can just be manually generated within here. Also, what we're working on in the current sprint is a manual credit mechanism as well, which is essentially the same thing. It's just the values are in a negative inverse as you create the record. But just to demonstrate how this looks, at least for the moment, from a from the view, you can look up a company. We'll select the company there. We'll select the contact as an example. Select an invoice address. We'll put an example PO. We've obviously got an invoice date, a tax date, and a current specified currency. You've got an account reference there as well. And if we hit save, we'll then move on to the invoice line details. So these are actually the physical line details of the invoice record itself. And here we can obviously put in our invoice line, the specific net. Obviously, we've got a tax code option in here, and that tax code will calculate the associated tax. We've got our nominal code, and we've got our department code. We hit save there, and then it basically saves that invoice line, and then obviously you can just keep going, creating more invoice lines associated with the invoice record. When complete, we'll have it so that you can navigate to the list invoices segment, and then from within here, obviously we've got our invoices that have been generated either manually or through the generate invoices functionality from the placement, the timesheet, the charge, and from there what we're looking to obviously implement is the print invoices component. So that's essentially where we currently stand. You can go into generate invoices, which is essentially just a list of all of the second level authorized timesheets and permanent placements and charges. You can go to list invoices to view invoices that have physically been made. In fact, it's filtered on this invoice date at the moment, but if I change that, you'll see that there's others in there as well. And then obviously we're looking to print the invoices, and part of the current sprint and the previous sprint we've been doing is manual invoice and manual credit there. We've still got generate payments and list payments to be done as well, and they are essentially a real close copy to what happens with the invoice inside of it in terms of payments. It's just a reverse kind of logic associated with them. So that payment that component will proceed quite quickly. But realistically, in terms of what we're trying to do with back office is finish over the course of the next month, or this current month now in September, to have back office really released as a fully finished solution going into October. So that's our current timescale. That's where we are with it. And as I say, part of the current sprint, it was the manual invoice component that we really completed and got over the line as functionality. That's an update there. The last point to cover is just the update that's been made to the candidate record in terms of now ability to be able to create a experience record from the personal tab, really with a view to updating the current employer, current manager, and current job title fields that have been added a couple of months ago. So what you can do now, what I will say is that there are still some updates that we want to make to this functionality that's now taking place over the course of this now current sprint. But what I'll do is demonstrate the functionality as it currently stands. So on clicking the plus icon, you'll get a partial view. Within here, you can enter in perhaps an updated job title as you know them to be working. You could type in the company, or you could do a search for the company if you know the company is on the system. And if you perhaps hit the start date as today's date, hit save, what you're going to get on refresh of the candidate record is that current employer now updated. So what we want to do is refine that functionality slightly in terms of dynamically updating the fields on run of that workflow, and also update the alert message and a couple other things as well. But just as things currently stand, you'll be able to create an experience record off the personal tab by using this plus icon as part of the sprint. As always, if you have any queries or feedback, please get in touch. I'll be keen to hear from you. Also, for those using Colleague 7, feel free to submit your enhancement requests via the support team or directly to me using the above email address. The next video will be the sprint plan for 19.09.01, and as always, that will contain a high-level overview on the items we intend to work on during that sprint. Thanks for watching.